I was approached by the European Cultural Foundation to engage with their Idea Camp 2015, and I was very excited about it, and was particularly interested in the theme for this year, which is I think why they invited me. The theme being building the city, and what I found particularly productive was the opportunity to speak with Vivian Paulson and Laura Gablier about the Idea Camp theme, and writing the paper was really a wonderful organic process in that we had several Skype conversations about what they were hoping and expecting to happen at the Idea Camp, and what the proposals from the idea makers had presented, and how that fit in with the work that I do on clandestine migration and this current European migration crisis. And so through the process of these conversations, I saw it as a very organic process that when I actually sat down to write my piece, called When Commoning Strategies Travel, which is kind of playing with this idea of the mobile commons, which was developed in one of the books that was an excerpt in this reader about different ways in which people write with this and engage with this idea of the commons. It became interesting for me to kind of explore this notion of the mobile commons, and one of the things that I first of all wanted to assess and address is the importance of unpacking the term refugee, and to make it clear that we understand what we talk about when we talk about the idea of a refugee, that it's a very specific category, very much connected to the UN Convention, the 1951 Convention, and so the criteria for being considered a refugee is a very limited and a very specific one. In other words, the wave of humanity, as one journalism referred to, that we see on TV in terms of these migration movements. There are very few within that group that would be legitimately considered a refugee on the basis of this criteria. It's a very limited they're very limited criteria, so that the others would then be constructed as economic migrants, coming here, not necessarily fleeing political persecution or religious persecution or other forms of persecution, but in many instances looking for alternative opportunities. And I have always said and always felt that poverty needs to be reassessed as a form of persecution, forcing individuals to leave or be displaced. And so within that frame, I talked about what happens when different migrants move. And I think in the commons literature, what I noticed was that there wasn't really much of a space other than this piece on the mobile commons for talking about the commoning strategies of migrants. And there was also this assumption that something happens when we move, that we leave our past behind us. And what I was also trying to suggest in my paper on mobile commoning strategies, or when commoning strategies travel, was this idea that this idea of the collective or the commons that we're learning about here in the West is so much a part and parcel of non-Western cultures that they don't even have to think about acting collectively or acting cooperatively. And so actually what you're seeing with these waves of migration that are collective is a commoning strategy that is embedded in the cultures from which they originate. And it's not something that is necessarily a product of the migration experience. And so I try to kind of unpack that in my paper and illustrate this idea of commoning strategies by specifically looking at the New Jungle in Calais, which is this makeshift community that wouldn't actually even pass the muster of a refugee camp, in terms of their living conditions. But you have over 3,000 individuals, clandestine migrants, migrants and refugees living in this space and trying to create a semblance of community and home through the existence of mosques, churches, schools, library, disco. And then the piece that I have incorporated was I was humbled to learn of a Mauritanian artist who was living in this camp, who was actually creating art, and that there was an actual local French artist who had started to come, which led me to engage with what is the important role of art in society and what is the important role of artists in society, and this notion that artists kind of exist in this dual role of they are critics of the society within which they live, but then they are also visionaries existing outside of society, and their very outsider position enables them to look at the world in different ways and actually create something beautiful that didn't exist before, and that in a tragic condition such as the New Jungle in Calais, as a new community, that the arts play a very important role. Creating something beautiful in an ugly space gives people hope. It also gives them an opportunity, an outlet, a momentary experience of beauty and enlightenment and hope in conditions that are not necessarily hopeful. And so all of this entangled notion of community, which includes the shared desire to go elsewhere, that creates the New Jungle is what I call a liminal or temporary space and a carceral space. And liminal aspect of it is the very fact that they are just waiting there, wanting to go somewhere else. And for many, the desire is to travel to the UK, jumping on a truck or jumping on a moving train, hoping to go through the Channel Tunnel to make their way to the UK. Or there are others who are trying to seek asylum in France, but their final destination is not the New Jungle. That is really kind of existing as we in anthropology call a liminal space or a temporary space or an in-between space. But the New Jungle is also a carceral space or a contained space, which is encroaching in the Calvino sense of the invisible city on the city itself, but it is there and it's existing. And this notion of just building a fence is not going to prevent the encroachment of this invisible city, the New Jungle, on the city itself. That simply erecting a fence is not going to prevent people from still wanting to get over that fence and create another opportunity or to move towards freedom, as opposed to the lack of freedom that's associated with a political or religious persecution or political or religious conflicts, in the case of Syria, or lack of economic opportunities in the case of West Africa. The shared destiny of freedom is one that all of the migrants share, and that shared desire for freedom and opportunity is what is catapulted by this commoning strategy.
Could it be that the fence is built to just give people a sense of safety? Because if we look at, for example, at the Great Wall of China, you can walk around the Great Wall of China, and people are like, well, why did they really build it?
These fences are not meant for purposes of safety. I reference the wonderful poem by Robert Frost, which was published in 1914, called The Mending Wall, which people assume good fences make good neighbors is part of the line in his poem, and I'm sure it's a saying you've probably heard before and never really thought about. And most people assume that when he's talking about good fences making good neighbors, that he's actually putting in a pitch for the need for fences to kind of to keep to demarcate what is your space and what is my space. But actually what he's arguing for is are questioning the need for fences. We don't have cows. Why do we need to contain people? And in the case of Hungary or Calais or Ceuta, Melilla, wherever you see these fences, it's for containment purposes. It's to keep those others out. So it's definitely not perceived as well. I guess from the vantage point of those who are not other, it is that if it's there to contain those who are not us. It perhaps from their perspective it may be seen as a safety mechanism. Yeah.
Is the Mediterranean boat crisis, is that a symptom or is that a problem? Is that the problem that needs to be solved, or is that a symptom of a bigger problem?
It's definitely a symptom of a bigger problem. I think that another way of framing it, and this is kind of connected to my bigger research project on routes, routes, and detours, is this idea of slavery being we are here because you brought us here, colonialism being we are here because you were there, that detours, this last phase, is we're going there because you're still here. That it is a symptom of a bigger problem. That it's people are wondering, why are all these people coming here? Well, you were there. You've in different ways messed up our homes and our communities, and we're just going over there. So it is a symptom of a bigger global economic problem. Yeah.
I have one more thing, and this is just like off of what you're saying. You were saying that so the quote unquote term refugee, but that people this is a normal occurrence that people are migrating. Does that mean that it's?
This has been going on for a long time.
But is it human nature that we're actually nomadic and that we're not?
No. I think the tendency is, and this is part of why. These movements are happening in a particular way. You've probably been watching what's going on in Hungary and the Hungarian-Serbian border, and now Croatian border, or Greece. These migrants have moved across multiple borders and crossed multiple national boundaries, and they know exactly where they want to go. And so that it's not as if they don't even that they want to stay in Croatia. That if there is an inclination to move, you want to move to a space that's familiar, and in terms of networks and chain migrations, you want to go where there are already established networks and communities. So they want to go to Germany. They want to go to the UK. They want to go where there are other established networks of people who are reminiscent of home. So it's about a sense of belonging, and of course you don't want to settle in a place where you don't necessarily speak the language or there isn't an infrastructure in place, but clearly the magnitude of this crisis has created a situation where Europe is having to think about this migrant allocation process and project on the basis of the GDP, the unemployment rate, and the infrastructure, to reallocate and distribute migrants on the basis of particular European nations' ability to accommodate the magnitude of the migrants that are coming. That it has to be that we're to the point now where that has to be a shared crisis, not just a humanitarian crisis for particular nations with an ethos about accepting refugees. That everyone has to take responsibility for this crisis. Yeah.
One last thing. Is there a solution, and what is the solution to this crisis?
I have been following in a very. I can give you two versions of that response. One is an idealistic version, which is one where we live in a world without borders, and we're, just as globalization has enabled for the free flow of capital and commodities and information and ideas and knowledge, that the idealistic in me would, or the idealistic and humanitarian in me. And idealism and pragmatism don't necessarily go hand in hand, because I recognize that the world without borders solution is not a viable one, but that is one sort of, that we just, the world is for us all. We just open up all the borders, and that's not it's not neither sustainable or viable. So the obvious other solution, which I know is one that is debated all the time, is a managed approach to migration and providing alternative and legal migration streams, for which would then allow people to legally migrate if they so desire. At the same time, the managed migration strategy, at the same time working at the source of, what are the push factors, which are infinitely complex and not necessarily something new, like Libya, for example, which is at the moment virtually ungovernable. So sorting, however it's able in a foreign policy sense, to sort out what's going at home in whatever these particular specific home national context we're talking about, that is contributing to these mass migrations. So it's kind of a dual-edged approach, creating some sort of managed migration strategy where people can legally manage, so that they're not at the mercy of traffickers and smugglers, and at the mercy of the Mediterranean and how dangerous and dire that passage or the other alternative dangerous pathways that have opened up, but also whatever that means in a specific national and political context, to sort out whatever is going on at home that is contributing to these mass migrations.
Good.
Yeah. Will
Sorry,
that
I'm
do?
sorry.
No, will that do? Will that
Yes, you're
do?
done. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
No, I mean,